Hello, this is Zainab from Team 9 and our topic is Authentication as a Service in Cloud Computing.
Authentication as a service is a process which identifies the user. Authentication as a service also gives the confirmation of authorized access of a system. In this process, user can be a person or can be an application.
So the next question is what cloud computing and cloud services really are. In cloud computing, computing resources are used and are made available on internet or intranet. Cloud computing always makes heavy use of virtualization and software-defined networking. Services that run on top of cloud computing are called cloud servers. A very good example of cloud service is Gmail, which we use daily. Another example of cloud computing service is Dropbox, where we can store our files.
In Authentication as a Service model, authentication server and other resources needed for authentication are placed on the cloud and are used by clients or users who are physically distant. The authentication servers and other components are moved from server farm to an enterprise network or to the cloud.
So basically there are three components of a Authentication as a Service model, and they are Cloud Federation,
Service provider, and we have the identity provider.
A cloud federation is the deployment and management of multiple external and internal cloud computing services to manage the business needs. A federation is a union of several smaller parts that perform a common action.
Service provider is the one that provides hosting authentication services. And we have the identity provider or the IDP, which is authoritative source of identity data for users who provide the primary authentication of the user.
I'm going to explain about how authentication service works. So when the user requests for any of the resources which is being deployed in the cloud provider already have authentication service inside and it redirects the user to the authentication server. So once the user is in the authentication server, he has been requested for the credentials to verify. When the user requests for the resources deployed in the cloud, the user is directed towards the authentication server. The authentication server requests the user to fill in the credentials and then it tries to validate the user. Once the user is being validated, it generates a one-time pass depending on the policies dictated by the corporate. So the key is being distributed to the client and the server, which is a cloud here, and then the user's request or the object whatever is being deployed in the cloud will be handed over to the user. I'm going to give a brief about how the actual authentication server works here. So the authentication service here actually uses something called Authentication Standard 2, which is an open standard for authentication, and it uses MIME as a main thing. So most of the request or the request from the end user comes mostly from the browser or through a user's API. So from the end point of view, the user is being pushed MIME policies, which actually works from the client side to authorize and all the transactions. Once the authentication on the background, everything is being done correctly, it actually handovers to the authentication server, which actually generates a one-time pass, and from there the user's request will be either granted or declined depending on the validation.
Authentication as a service provides a lot of advantages. One is elastic capability, which is scale up, down and on demand. Resources are selected and virtualized. Interoperability between different platforms, high availability, secure and reliable. Pay-as-you-go service or pay-per-use service.
Authentication as a service gives confidentiality to the cloud user. It's cooperate with other authentication server for authentication. It is highly scalable that can accommodate business of all sizes.